Good evening and welcome to the League of Women Voters Presents. My name is Laura Wegman, filling in as moderator tonight for Jim Robertson. Tonight's topic will be renewable energy. We'll talk about moral and national security arguments for renewable energy and addressing climate change concerns. I have two guests here with me tonight who are both involved with various aspects of this topic. First, we have Carla Klein, who's Deputy Director with Renew Missouri and on the steering committee of Missouri Interfaith Power and Light. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you.
Nice to have you. We also have with us Jeff Owens, who's with Missouri Solar Applications, and he'll talk about the importance of renewable energy to the military and national security. Welcome, Jeff.
Good evening.
So if we could talk a little bit first about your backgrounds related to this topic in general, why these issues of faith and the military may not be areas that people associate with renewable energy, but they're actually important movements involved with both of them regarding issues of energy and climate change. If we can just start with you, Carla, tell us a little bit about your background first in renewable energy and your role with Renew Missouri and IPL.
All right. I've been working with environmental organizations for about 15 years, and mostly recently with Renew Missouri. I've been with Renew Missouri about 2.5 years, and issues of air quality really became very important to me several years ago because my daughter Sarah has asthma, and she almost died from complications of an asthma attack. So air quality issues are very near and dear to my heart, and just as the more I learned about the issue and the total impacts that our energy use and different energy sources have on the environment and on our health, it just became a really important issue to me. And with climate change now being at a crisis point, we really understand that this is one of the biggest challenges environmentally that we've ever faced. So it's very important for me as a mother and as an advocate to be involved in climate change issues. And also as a person of faith, I was very excited to learn about Missouri Interfaith Power and Light, and that there was a movement to really bring that conversation to the mainstream religious organizations and get people talking from the pulpit about creation care and the importance of climate change. And all major faith traditions have a statement about creation care in the Quran or the Bible or whatever the faith doctrine is. And they also have a moral obligation to care for the poor and vulnerable. Well, of course, climate change impacts the poor and vulnerable first and foremost. And so it's very exciting to be involved with this movement. Missouri, it's a national organization, and Missouri was, I believe, the 41st state that was recognized as a state IPL. So working with a great bunch of women, 11 people on our steering committee, and they're all from different faith backgrounds.
Okay, great. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you spent some time in the military. Can you talk about how that came about and what your role was?
I was born and raised in Missouri. The tax of September 11th gave me a lot of time for thought. I had not served. I also feel that those who are able need to serve in order for us to continue to have a volunteer force. So I was enlisted in November of 2001. At the time, thought maybe I would be sent to do something involving the response to Al-Qaeda and attacks then. Of course, Iraq developed. I was stationed in Germany, saw how the Germans lived, with a lot less energy intensive way of life, recycling, windmills, the big wind turbines, and solar. There was a lot of sun in Iraq. I was deployed and did 2 tours, 2003 and 2004. I was 3 years active duty, and the remaining 5 years of my contract was in the reserves. I went back to school on the GI Bill. As I got out, I was a physics major as an undergraduate, and so somewhat ironically, As I was working my way into renewable energy as a possible career path, I was given an offer to work as a research assistant by a professor in the College of Engineering who had a grant from the Department of Army to develop flexible solar cells on flexible substrates. With my background in physics, I actually wound up over in the physics department and with another principal investigator on that grant. And I spent a year and a half working in her lab where we made both organic or plastic light-emitting diodes and plastic from organic chemicals solar cells. So the idea is on one side you could have a tent with solar on the outside and lights on the inside, and much easier to deploy, and in an advanced situation an Advon party could carry lighter weight more rapidly and have some source of power more quickly.
Okay. Are those being used in the field today?
Well, I'm about, 4 years out of my military service now, but it is in use. The technology, the military, of course, as well as our government, drives a lot of technology, and it has been a benefit. And I'm like everyone else, I read and hear about it in the news now. Yeah, I think KBIA had a section on it last week on the radio, and it's been officially designated as a permanent office of research for the Army. And the communication equipment, the battery technology is also improved. So the kind of gear that the commo specialists have to carry is lighter, easier to maneuver. And when I was in Baghdad, there's a military specialty which is effectively a power plant, a unit that will go in and take over an existing power plant or set up some form of power for a base camp. And they would also have an advantage with improvements in technology like that. No need to truck in massive loads of diesel fuel or what they call JP8 in the military. Much what they call hardening, it's a hardened target if you don't have a big supply line trucking in fuel and supplies to where your camp is. So anything that can be done to reduce that, it's not just the cost savings, it's just also the military advantage to not have that vulnerability of, it's easy to go in and blow up a pipeline, cut a power line, target and attack a convoy. And if you can avoid that, it's a strategic advantage.
So it's definitely presented as an issue of national security, and this is something they are putting a priority on in terms of funding and technology.
It's certainly a factor,
Okay, great. You mentioned when you were talking about your time in Iraq a little bit, there's a lot of sun there. How much is solar energy used there? Is that something that has made any inroads at all, or what's the situation like?
It has, and a lot of applications. And I think certain countries, like, for example, Dubai, I think might be further along, but even Saudi Arabia and Asia in general is the #1 market at the moment, but that includes China, of course. Desalinization is another application of just solar energy. And in desert environments like in the southwest of our country, where there's more consistent, clearer skies, that they can focus the direct rays, these large utility scale power plants, that's more like a traditional power plant where they heat a fluid and produce steam and turn a turbine. Those are common as well.
Okay.
In fact, my employer at Missouri Solar Apps out of school, one of his first engineering jobs was to design and work on building one of those in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia.
Interesting. And yet we often associate that part of the world with oil as well, and I'm sure for them, that's a less expensive
They'd
alternative.
rather sell it to us. And
Right. So it's a financial concern as well. There might be some pushback there maybe in terms of implementing solar or rather renewable energy because they've got the oil and they want to sell it to us. It's a big business there, right? I mean, is there a pushback in terms of implementing that? Are they
the little bit I've
interested?
read in the news lines, I think they are completely aware and have long-term energy plans to actually build out tremendous amounts of solar. And there's been a lot of talk and discussion about exporting solar power from the Sahara to Europe. So it's
Big business.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it doesn't mean the oil business will stop, but
sure,
Yeah.
yeah. Carlo, if we can shift a little bit, talking about just pushing from different angles on renewable energy. You are coming at this from a perspective of faith communities, and you mentioned that the group that you've been working with is a pretty recent addition in Missouri, correct? Is that just in the last year or so?
Yes, there has been, folks involved in trying to get Missouri IPL organized for a couple of years, and it just seemed that the right connection or collection of people came together to get this done and get recognized by the national IPL. So it's been fairly recent, about a year, not quite.
Okay, what are the main arguments in terms of why renewable energy and sustainability and faith are compatible? Like, what are the common goals?
Well, again, going back to the fact that we are mandated by our Creator to care for the environment, to care for His creation, and I am not as good at giving all the biblical quotes as our folks that are actually working in the seminary, but there are several Bible verses in all faith doctrines that talk about care of creation. And when you think about the major focus of a lot of mission programs throughout the faith community, they go to third world countries and they want to help them with food and cleaning their water, and they're really starting to realize that, like in Bangladesh, there's 170 million people that live 3 feet from sea level, and that what is going to become of those communities as we continue to see climate change wreak havoc on our environment, sea level rise. We're seeing huge droughts, and here in the United States, all the floods along the Mississippi River, and what that's doing to people. It's impacting people's daily lives, how they have food. Do they have access to food? Do they have access to water? So it's really a moral obligation to the community that they're trying to serve. So that is probably the biggest focus. And then several of the programs that are offered through Missouri Interfaith Power and Light, they have a cool congregations challenge, which is really great. And it's a program where we go in and help churches do energy audits. And they have a program where you actually calculate if everyone lived at the same level of energy use that your church does or your faith community does, how many earths it would take to sustain that. And one of the folks that did this for one of the first challenges in St. Louis, they found out that it would take 34 earths to sustain the way that their faith community was using energy. So they went to work putting in new furnace filters, new windows. They did a complete energy audit, did a lot of upgrades, and now they're saving $10,000 a year on their energy bills. And another part of that program is to use the tithing of 10%. So in the program, they ask congregations and individuals to tithe their energy use. So they're reducing their waste by 10%, their energy use by 10%. trying to calculate their carbon footprints. So it's really a great challenge that comes about through this. And another major focus is on faith, food, and climate, and where our food comes from, how it's produced. And one of the examples they used was a Pop-Tart, and how many chemicals are in that Pop-Tart, and how energy intensive it is to create some of our food that is, not very good for us. And so there's a lot of programs that, are really focusing on local food communities and community gardens. It's just really each faith community finds a different way that they feel that they can best bring that to their congregation and really start a movement.
What kind of variety of faiths have had representatives working with this group? I mean, is it just all across all kinds of denominations?
It is. Nationally, there are mosque and temples involved. Here in Missouri, we have Jewish community. The United Church of Christ is involved. We have Lutherans, United Methodist, Baptist. So really a broad variety of faith groups that are involved with the Missouri, and we're always looking for more.
Okay. And in addition to those, you mentioned several initiatives that are with church communities, but I think, has your group also been active on the political side and trying to raise awareness of renewable energy issues? Can you talk a little bit about any of those efforts?
Oh yes, thank you for asking
Sure.
about that. Because we do a lot on the education side, but we are also advocates, and we feel very strongly that for the climate change issue, we have to not only reduce our energy use. Of course, it's energy efficiency and reduction first, but then we have to look at the sources of our energy. So we are huge advocates for energy efficiency and renewable energy policies, be that at the city, local level, or at the state level. So one of the issues that we are working on at the state level is House Bill 44. We're working with a lot of Renew Missouri and a lot of environmental organizations to oppose this legislation that would essentially gut our renewable energy standards. So we call our legislators and talk to them and try to bring the faith voice to that conversation as well.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit about the bill? It involves what can qualify toward the renewable energy standard, correct?
Yes. The bill that was introduced by Representative Corman would allow all old existing hydroelectric dams to count towards our renewable energy standard. And most of these, if not all, are 100 years old and older. And the whole idea behind the renewable energy standard was to diversify our energy source and bring new sources of energy online so that we're switching over to renewable energy. So allowing them to count these huge hydro dams would just essentially gut the law, and they wouldn't have to do new renewable energy. We would just be using what we were already doing.
Right.
So Missouri voters did not vote to raise their bills by up to 1% so that they could do exactly what they were already doing. So it really makes no sense on the face of it.
There's also an economic aspect to that, I think, in that the renewable energy standard is, I think, in some way expected to create jobs, correct? And
Absolutely.
if you're including that toward the total, the argument would be that it would not create as many jobs, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's tremendous potential, and Jeff may be able to speak to that even more on how many renewable energy businesses have opened up. And it's not just solar installers. There's a broad range of businesses that we can attract to the state, and of course supplying good jobs, good green jobs for Missouri citizens was a huge part of why Missouri citizens voted in favor of this. Solar is the fastest growing industry in the nation right now, I believe. And so that gives tremendous potential for Missouri to have good green jobs and long-term, well-paying jobs.
Yeah, well, Jeff, I mean, if you could comment on that in a couple of aspects, the creation of jobs through renewable energy initiatives. And then I think that probably also we talked a little bit about, defense initiatives creating. I think I just read recently that a base in Texas was implementing a large solar farm. Have you heard anything about this? That's supposed to be a large, like maybe the largest renewable energy resource so far on a base. And I suppose that's creating jobs as well. Can you talk a little bit about, is that experiencing a boom, or what are you seeing in the industry?
So I do owe my Missouri job to the solar industry. There's about 25 people directly supported by the solar activity out of my office alone in Jeff City. After I graduated, I left the state and came back for this job about 3 years ago. I think the official State Department of Economic Development numbers is about 1,200 directly employed in solar at this point. But these are the kind of jobs that, for that meter base or for that circuit breaker, I mean, for example, Millbank is in Kansas City, and we are installing Millbank meter bases every job we do. So like the auto industry, there's a cascade of jobs that are created. They're well-paying, stable jobs. I just opened the Solar News that I read last night before I went to bed, and the Carpenters Union had an advertisement in there how they're training carpenters for solar. Now, do we want to keep these jobs? Well, I hope so, for my sake and my family's sake, but also for Missouri's sake and for the country's sake and the world's sake. And one of the great things about Columbia is when I came back, I had an opportunity to meet folks like Carla and interact with groups like the League of Women Voters, and even through the community here, just learn about all these things and be part of this. So at this point, from meeting the fellows over at Quaker Oats here in town, one of the first Solar One projects, and organizing solar tours and participating in the campaign that led to the renewable state law with Carla and PJ and everyone at Renew Missouri, and participating with the local climate change coalition. Most creeds and religions have it in their faith that to harm the environment, that's a sin, or whatever their creed is, how it be described. I'm thinking of the Catholic faith, because the Pope decreed that about 6 or 7 years ago. Most Fortune 500 corporations have it in their executive statement somewhere that they will pursue environmental benefits. And the military is a reflection of our government. The government certainly wants to pursue that. So yes, there's announcements every day. And while I was in the university, for example, there was a company that they were a engineering, procurement, and construction firm that were specifically doing military projects. My wife is Puerto Rican. Down in Puerto Rico, about the only solar that, a lot of the solar are on our U.S. military bases. As a combination of just also being economically responsible. The military has an enormous footprint in terms of the energy it uses. So Fort Hood is a very large base, and I'm not for sure if that's the project that you read about, but utility scale is now shifting. It used to be primarily Europe in 2010. Of all the solar energy installed in the world, the U.S. installed about 6.5% of what was installed worldwide. Mm-hmm. Last year, the things are shifting. We're number 2 after China as far as where the solar is being installed in the world.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But it's being installed worldwide at a very rapid pace. And it's not just, as Carla mentioned, it's important to remember that energy efficiency measures. I mean, Missouri, the good news is Missouri can gain a lot. There are a lot of various rankings that put us somewhere around 48th in the country.
43rd, I think we are now.
43rd, maybe.
Yeah.
And around here, you can see a lot of examples of how things should be done right, and then maybe how things could be done a little bit better. And So there's really tremendous opportunities to be gained from shrinking your usage. And then once you have, okay, I would like to have this for my lifestyle, then it's more affordable to do it with renewables or somehow offset your impact on the environment in a good way.
Right.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that I know the military's goal that they've stated is 25% of all of their energy is to come from renewables by 2025. So
Right.
25% by 2025. In Missouri, when we passed our renewable energy standard, it's 15% by 2021. So we were trying to be on the conservative side to, get things up and going, and has definitely been a challenge. So we have a long way to go in Missouri.
How
But-
how is Missouri doing toward that goal?
Great, fantastic.
Well, the utilities.
Or not?
You said fantastic. I'm just like, well, no, actually, the investor-owned utilities were supposed to meet 2% of renewable energy by 2011, and they have not done that. So there's some concerns there, and we are definitely pushing them. And so when we see efforts to roll back our renewable energy standard, that's disheartening. And one of the things, though, that I so love about Missouri Interfaith Power and Light is that as people of faith, you are called to have faith and hope. And so sometimes when you're working on issues on a daily basis, it can be discouraging. But so I go back to my friends at MoIPL and get regenerated for my faith and hope on those issues.
I jumped a little bit there. I'm working in the private sector, so from the perspective of Missouri citizens, individuals, and business owners, they really get this. It's just a joy every day to be able to serve and work in this field and have customers see the difference in their utility bill. Some are very ambitious. We've worked with, I've managed over 100 solar electric projects in a little over 2 years, and over 1 million watts installed here in central Missouri. And the cost of solar is now approaching parity with the utility rates
Huh. All right.
without any incentives.
That's interesting. So that's probably a trend that we'll see continue.
We're seeing, the trend puts us in about 5 years to be competitive without any incentives at all.
All right.
Now, if I don't want to bash the oil industry or the coal industry or other industries, but what industry has been able to achieve that and then completely be in the free market in 5 years? And all we asked for with the state law was to give it a chance. Like Carla said, 15% in 2021. That was a very conservative number.
Okay. Well, that's a good point. I think we'll have to end on that because we've run out of time. So thanks to you, Jeff, and to you, Carla, and thanks everyone for watching. Good night.